The grand amphitheater of the Galactic Science Academy was alive with anticipation as delegates from across the Milky Way took their seats. All eyes were on the young human named Emily, who had been invited to present her findings on a complex mathematical enigma that had vexed the greatest minds of the galaxy for centuries. Emily took a deep breath, steeling her nerves as she gazed out at the sea of unfamiliar faces. Thousands of alien eyes were trained upon her, some narrowed in skepticism, others glimmering with curious anticipation. She knew that to these esteemed professors and researchers, she was an unknown quantity, a representative of a species that had only recently joined the galactic consortium. Her home planet of Earth was regarded by many as a backwater, its people as primitive upstarts who had no business rubbing elbows with the galaxy's intellectual elite. But Emily was undaunted. She had spent countless hours poring over the complex mathematical theorems and intricate models that had stumped the brightest alien minds. Where they had seen only an impenetrable wall of complexity, she had discovered elegant patterns and hidden symmetries. And now she was determined to share her insights with this gathered assembly of galactic luminaries. As Emily stepped up to the podium, the hush that fell over the amphitheater was almost deafening. She could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the silent challenge in their unblinking gazes, but she refused to be cowed. Straightening her shoulders, she launched into her presentation with confidence and clarity. The holographic display behind her came to life, filling the air with a dazzling array of equations, graphs, and visualizations. Emily's fingers danced across the controls, her motions fluid and assured as she guided the audience through the intricacies of the problem at hand. At first, the alien academics watched with thinly veiled impatience, their expressions betraying their belief that this human upstart was wasting their time. But as Emily's presentation progressed, their smugness began to give way to a growing sense of unease. The way she effortlessly manipulated the complex mathematical models, teasing out insights and connections that had eluded them for centuries, was nothing short of astonishing. Emily could feel the tide turning in the room, the undercurrent of skepticism slowly giving way to rapt attention. She pressed on, her voice clear and her explanations concise, her keen intellect shining through with every passing minute. As she delved deeper into the heart of the enigma, the aliens in the audience began to lean forward in their seats, their eyes widening with dawning realization. Emily was not simply reciting prepackaged theories or regurgitating the work of others. She was actively solving the problem before their very eyes, her mind racing ahead of theirs with breathtaking speed and precision. The holographic display became a whirlwind of activity, equations shifting and transforming as Emily uncovered layer after layer of hidden complexity. Where the alien professors had seen only an impenetrable fortress of mathematical riddles, she saw an elegant interconnected web of patterns and principles, a puzzle that to her was not only solvable, but elegant in its solution. As the minutes ticked by, the amphitheater fell into a hushed silence, save for the rapid clacking of Emily's fingers against the podium's controls. The aliens watched, transfixed, as the human prodigy methodically dismantled the very enigma that had resisted their collective efforts for generations. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, Emily's presentation reached its climax. With a final flourish, she unveiled the solution, a simple yet profoundly insightful rearrangement of the equations that cast the entire problem in a new light. The aliens stared, dumbfounded, as the answer unfolded before them, their mouths agape in stunned disbelief. For a long, breathless moment, the amphitheater was completely silent. And then, slowly, the sound of hesitant applause began to ripple through the crowd, growing steadily in volume until it erupted into a thunderous ovation. Emily allowed herself a small, triumphant smile as she surveyed the sea of awestruck faces. She had come to the Galactic Science Academy to prove that humanity was more than just a curiosity, more than a primitive upstart on the galactic stage. And as the cheers of the alien delegates washed over her, she knew that she had succeeded beyond her wildest dreams. As the thunderous applause slowly subsided, the alien academics in the amphitheater began to exchange puzzled glances, their expressions a mixture of begrudging respect and perplexed disbelief. How was it possible that this young human, this representative of a species they had long dismissed as upstart primitives, had managed to solve an enigma that had eluded the greatest minds of the Galactic Consortium? Professor Vylov, a renowned Saltonian mathematician, was the first to find his voice. Clearing his throat, he rose from his seat and approached the podium, his tentacles writhing with barely contained agitation. "Young human," he began, his voice laced with a tone of condescension that did little to mask the uncertainty beneath. "Your presentation was impressive, to be sure. But I must confess, I am at a loss to fully comprehend the significance of your findings. Surely there must be some flaw or oversight in your work, some detail that we have simply overlooked in our own research." Emily met Vylov's gaze evenly, her features betraying no hint of intimidation. "Professor," she replied, her tone calm and measured, "I can assure you that my work is sound. I have spent countless hours poring over the existing research, and it was through a careful, methodical analysis that I was able to uncover the connections and insights that have eluded your colleagues." Vylov's tentacles twitched with irritation, and several of the other alien professors began to murmur in agreement, their expressions skeptical. "That may be so," the Zoltonian conceded, "but surely you must understand our hesitation to accept such a radical departure from the established theories. Generations of our brightest minds have grappled with this problem, and now you claim to have solved it in a matter of hours." Emily nodded, her gaze unwavering. "I understand your skepticism, Professor, but I can assure you that my findings are not the result of some lucky accident or fluke. They are the product of rigorous analysis and an understanding of the underlying principles at work." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the amphitheater as she addressed the assembled academics. "You see, the key to solving this enigma was not to simply push harder against the existing frameworks, but to step back and re-examine the fundamental assumptions that have shaped your approach. By looking at the problem through a different lens, I was able to identify patterns and connections that your methods had overlooked." Vylov's tentacles twitched again, and Emily could sense the growing unease among the other professors. Clearly, her words were striking a nerve, challenging the very foundations of their intellectual authority. "And what, pray tell, are these fundamental assumptions that you claim we have overlooked?" the Zoltonian demanded, his tone edging dangerously close to outright hostility. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. "Well, Professor, to put it bluntly, your approach has been hampered by your own preconceptions about the nature of the universe. You have grown so accustomed to thinking within the constraints of your own limited perspective that you have failed to consider alternative paradigms." A murmur of outrage rippled through the crowd, and several of the professors rose from their seats, their expressions thunderous. Vylov's tentacles lashed out, his eyes narrowed to slits. "How dare you? We are the foremost scientific minds in the galaxy, and you dare to suggest that our methods are flawed." He spat, his voice rising to a shrill crescendo. "This is an outrage. I demand that you retract your claims at once, or face the consequences of your insolence." Emily held up a hand, her expression calm and unperturbed. "I understand your anger, Professor, but I assure you that my claims are not made lightly. I have studied your work, and the work of your colleagues, in great detail, and I have come to the conclusion that your approach, while admirable in its rigor, has been constrained by a fundamental bias, a bias that stems from the very nature of your alien biology and the limited scope of your collective experience." The amphitheater erupted into a cacophony of outraged shouts and protests, but Emily refused to be cowed. Raising her voice to be heard over the din, she continued, "You see, the problem with your methods is that they are inherently limited by the way you perceive and interact with the universe. As members of a species with radically different physiological and cognitive attributes, you have been unable to fully comprehend the true complexity and interconnectedness of the phenomena you seek to understand." A hush fell over the crowd, and Emily could feel the weight of their disbelieving stares. Vyloth stood rooted to the spot, his tentacles frozen in mid-gesture, his mouth agape in stunned silence. "But I, as a human," Emily declared, her voice ringing with quiet confidence, "am able to see these patterns and connections in a way that you simply cannot. And that, my esteemed colleagues, is the key to solving this enigma, and countless others that have eluded you for centuries." The amphitheater descended into a deafening silence as Emily's bold proclamation hung in the air. The assembled alien academics stared at her, their expressions a mix of shock, outrage, and begrudging intrigue. For several long, tense moments, no one dared to speak, the weight of her words seeming to suck the very oxygen from the room. Finally, it was Professor Vyloth who broke the stillness, his tentacles twitching with barely contained fury. "You dare to suggest that we, the foremost scientific minds in the galaxy, have been blinded by our own biases?" He spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "This is an unforgivable insult. Your human arrogance knows no bounds." Emily held up a hand, her expression calm and unwavering. "Professor, I understand your anger, but I assure you that my words are not born of arrogance, but of a sincere desire to expand the horizons of our collective knowledge. I am not here to attack you or your colleagues, but to offer a new perspective, one that I believe can unlock the true secrets of the universe." Vyloth's eyes narrowed to slits, his tentacles lashing out in a display of barely restrained aggression. "And what, pray tell, is this new perspective that you claim can enlighten us?" he hissed. "Surely you do not expect us to simply abandon centuries of painstaking research and groundbreaking discoveries in favor of your human insights." Emily took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping across the assembled academics. "I do not ask that you abandon your work, Professor. In fact, I believe that by integrating my findings with your own, we can create a more comprehensive understanding of the problems we seek to solve." She paused, her eyes meeting Vyloth's with unwavering determination. "You see, the key to unlocking this enigma lies in recognizing the inherent limitations of your current approaches. As members of species with vastly different cognitive architectures and sensory modalities, you have been constrained by your own biological and cultural biases." The murmurs of discontent in the audience grew louder, but Emily pressed on, her voice rising to be heard over the din. "Consider, for example, the way you perceive the fundamental nature of space and time. As creatures whose experience of the physical world is shaped by your unique physiologies, you have developed mathematical models and theoretical frameworks that reflect those limitations." She gestured toward the holographic display behind her, the complex equations and visualizations casting an eerie glow across her face. "But what if I were to tell you that your understanding of these concepts is fundamentally flawed? That the very foundations upon which you have built your scientific edifice are, in fact, incomplete?" The crowd erupted into a chorus of angry shouts and protests, but Emily held up her hand, silencing them with a sharp gesture. "I know this is difficult to accept," she continued, her voice rising above the din. "But I have uncovered evidence that suggests the existence of higher dimensional structures and nonlinear chronologies that lie beyond the scope of your current models." Vyloth's tentacles thrashed wildly, his eyes blazing with outrage. "Impossible," he bellowed. "You expect us to simply discard centuries of painstaking research and accept the ravings of a primitive bite? This is madness." Emily shook her head, her expression unwavering. "I do not ask you to discard your work, Professor. I merely suggest that you expand your horizons, that you be willing to consider alternative perspectives and paradigms. For it is only by embracing new ways of thinking that we can truly unlock the secrets of the universe." Vyloth opened his mouth to retort, but Emily raised her hand, silencing him. "I understand your skepticism, and I do not expect you to accept my findings immediately. But I urge you to approach this problem with an open mind, to consider the possibility that your own biases may be obscuring the true nature of reality." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the amphitheater. "After all, is that not the very essence of scientific inquiry? to challenge our assumptions, to seek out new frontiers of knowledge, even in the face of entrenched dogma. The crowd fell silent, their expressions a mix of grudging respect and lingering doubt. Vyloth, his tentacles still twitching with agitation, slowly sank back into his seat, his eyes never leaving Emily's face. "Very well, human," he growled, his voice low and menacing. "I shall consider your proposal. But know this, if you seek to undermine the foundations of our scientific establishment, you will face the full wrath of the Galactic Consortium." Emily nodded, a faint smile playing on her lips. "I understand, Professor, but I assure you, my only goal is to expand the boundaries of our shared knowledge, to push the limits of what we can achieve together." With that, she turned and strode back to the podium, her steps measured and confident. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the Galactic Order. In the days that followed Emily's confrontation with the Galactic Science Academy, the young human prodigy found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Word of her groundbreaking insights had spread like wildfire through the Galactic Consortium, and she was inundated with requests, invitations, and demands from every corner of the known universe. Delegations from the most prestigious research institutions clamored for audiences with her, each faction vying for the chance to be the first to incorporate her revolutionary theories into their work. Entire departments were mobilized, their best and brightest minds dedicated to the task of deciphering the implications of Emily's findings. But the human remained steadfast in the face of this onslaught, politely declining most of the invitations and deferring to the Galactic Science Academy's official channels for disseminating her research. She knew that the real battle lay ahead, and she needed to conserve her energy and focus if she was to have any hope of navigating the treacherous political landscape of the consortium. The aliens, for their part, were in a state of turmoil. Professor Vyloth and his colleagues had returned to their respective institutions, their minds consumed by the implications of Emily's bold claims. How could they possibly reconcile her insights with the foundations of their scientific understanding? What would it mean to discard centuries of accumulated knowledge and accepted theories? The debate raged on, with heated arguments erupting in conference halls and academic forums across the galaxy. Some were quick to dismiss Emily as a charlatan, insisting that her findings were nothing more than the ramblings of a primitive upstart. Others, however, were more cautious, their curiosity piqued by the sheer elegance and simplicity of her solutions. At the heart of the controversy was the fundamental question of whether the human's perspective could truly offer a more comprehensive understanding of the universe than the alien's own. Were their biases and preconceptions truly that limiting, as Emily had suggested? And if so, what did that mean for the very nature of reality itself? As the weeks turned into months, the pressure on Emily only continued to mount. Delegations from the Galactic Council began to arrive, their emissaries demanding that she present her findings before the assembled representatives of the consortium. The stakes were higher than ever, and Emily knew that the future of her people, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. Finally, after much deliberation and behind-the-scenes maneuvering, the Council agreed to grant Emily a formal audience. The amphitheater of the Galactic Science Academy was filled to capacity, with delegates from every corner of the known universe gathered to witness the spectacle. As Emily approached the podium, she could feel the weight of their collective gaze upon her. The alien academics, their expressions a mix of skepticism and begrudging curiosity, watched her every move with rapt attention. The emissaries of the Galactic Council, their robes of office gleaming in the ambient light, sat in stony silence, their faces unreadable. Taking a deep breath, Emily launched into her presentation, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls as she once again unveiled the intricate mathematical models and visualizations that had so captivated the audience during her initial appearance. But this time, she went further, delving deeper into the implications of her findings and weaving a tapestry of interconnected concepts that challenged the very foundations of the consortium's scientific worldview. As she spoke, the gallery erupted into a cacophony of murmurs and whispered debates, the air thick with tension. The alien academics, their expressions a mix of fascination and unease, exchanged furtive glances, their tentacles twitching with barely contained agitation. And then, just as Emily reached the climax of her presentation, a lone voice cut through the din, silencing the crowd with a single authoritative command. Enough. All eyes turned toward the dais, where the Grand Overseer of the Galactic Council had risen from his seat, his eyes narrowed in a stern expression. "This, human," the Overseer began, his voice dripping with disdain, "has made some rather ambitious claims. Claims that, if true, would call into question the very bedrock of our scientific understanding." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the assembled delegates. "We cannot simply accept such radical propositions without the most rigorous of scrutiny. The stability of the Galactic Consortium depends upon the continued validity of our established theories and principles." The Overseer turned his attention back to Emily, his expression hardening. "Therefore, we have decided that you, human, will be placed under the supervision of a panel of our finest scientific minds. They will evaluate your work and determine whether your findings warrant further consideration." Emily felt her heart sink, her mind racing as she realized the gravity of the situation. This was no longer a mere academic debate. It was a high-stakes political struggle, one that could determine the fate of her entire species. "Overseer," she began, her voice firm and unwavering, "I understand your concerns, but I must protest. My work is sound, and I believe that it holds the key to unlocking a deeper understanding of the universe. To subject it to the scrutiny of a biased panel would be a grave disservice to the pursuit of true knowledge." The Overseer's eyes narrowed, his expression unyielding. "Then you leave us no choice, human. Refuse to cooperate, and you will be barred from ever presenting your findings to the Galactic Consortium. Comply, and we shall see if your insights truly have merit." Emily felt the weight of the galaxy's collective gaze upon her, and she knew that she stood at a crossroads. The future of her people hung in the balance, and she could not afford to fail. As the Overseer's ultimatum hung in the air, a hush fell over the packed amphitheater. Emily felt the weight of 1,000 alien gazes upon her, each one filled with a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and, in some cases, outright hostility. She knew that the stakes could not be higher. Her very ability to present her groundbreaking findings to the Galactic Consortium now hinged on her willingness to submit to the scrutiny of a hand-picked panel of alien experts, a prospect that filled her with a deep sense of trepidation. But even as the magnitude of the challenge before her threatened to overwhelm, Emily's resolve never wavered. She had come too far, sacrificed too much, to back down now. With a steadying breath, she straightened her shoulders and addressed the Overseer, her voice clear and unwavering. "Overseer, I understand your concerns, and I am not one to shy away from rigorous examination of my work. However, I must insist that the panel you have proposed is ill-suited to the task at hand." A murmur of protest rippled through the crowd, but Emily raised her hand, silencing them. "You speak of protecting the bedrock of our scientific understanding. Yet the very individuals you would task with this evaluation are the ones whose worldviews and biases I have directly challenged." The Overseer's brow furrowed, his expression darkening. "Are you suggesting, human, that the foremost scientific minds of the Galactic Consortium are incapable of impartial judgment?" He growled, his voice laced with barely concealed outrage. Emily shook her head, her gaze unwavering. "Not at all, Overseer. I have the utmost respect for the intellectual capacities of your colleagues, but the nature of my findings is such that they require a fundamental shift in perspective, one that, I fear, your panel may be unwilling or unable to embrace." She paused, her eyes sweeping across the assembled delegates. "You see, the very assumptions and frameworks that have guided the consortium's scientific endeavors for centuries are precisely the ones that I have challenged. To have my work evaluated through that same lens would be akin to asking a fish to judge the merits of flight. The amphitheater erupted into a cacophony of protests and indignant shouts, but Emily held up her hand, silencing the crowd. "Overseer, I am not here to disparage the achievements of your people. Indeed, I admire the rigor and dedication that has brought the Galactic Consortium to the pinnacle of scientific inquiry." She paused, her expression softening. "But I believe that true progress can only be made when we are willing to consider alternative perspectives, to embrace the possibility that our most deeply held beliefs may be incomplete. And that is precisely what I am offering. A new way of seeing the universe that has the potential to unlock mysteries that have eluded your greatest minds for generations." The overseer regarded her with a mixture of frustration and begrudging respect. "And what, pray tell, do you propose, human?" he asked, his tone daring her to challenge the authority of the consortium once more. Emily took a deep breath, steeling herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. "I request that the Galactic Council convene a special panel, one comprised not just of your most esteemed scientists, but of representatives from across the spectrum of our civilizations. Only then can we ensure that my findings are evaluated with the depth and impartiality they deserve." The amphitheater fell silent, the tension in the air palpable. The overseer's eyes narrowed as he contemplated Emily's words, his tentacles twitching with a mixture of irritation and curiosity. "And what," he said slowly, "makes you think that the consortium would agree to such an unorthodox arrangement?" Emily held the overseer's gaze, her expression unwavering. "Because, overseer, the future of the entire galaxy may depend upon it." The words hung in the air, their gravity weighing heavily upon the assembled delegates. For a moment, no one dared to speak, the implications of Emily's statement reverberating through the cavernous space. Then, slowly, the overseer nodded, his expression unreadable. "Very well, human. You have made your case, and we shall consider your proposal." He turned to the panel of advisors seated behind him, his voice cutting through the silence. "Convene the special evaluation panel, as the human has requested. Make sure that it is comprised of the most diverse and open-minded thinkers we can find." The advisors exchanged startled glances, but quickly began to scramble, their fingers flying across the holographic controls as they set the wheels in motion. Emily felt a surge of relief, but she knew that the battle was far from over. The fate of her people, and perhaps the entire galaxy, now rested on the outcome of this unprecedented evaluation. With a steely determination, she prepared herself for the challenges that lay ahead. In the aftermath of Emily's bold request, the Galactic Council wasted no time in assembling the special evaluation panel she had proposed. Word of the humans' challenge to the established scientific order had spread like wildfire through the consortium, sparking a flurry of debate and speculation. The aliens, long accustomed to the unquestioned dominance of their intellectual elite, were both intrigued and unsettled by the prospect of a radical new perspective. Some welcomed the opportunity to consider alternative paradigms, their curiosity piqued by the elegance and simplicity of Emily's solutions. Others, however, viewed her proposals as a direct threat to the very foundations of their scientific worldview, and they mobilized to defend the status quo with unyielding determination. As the Council's emissaries fanned out across the galaxy, scouring the far-flung corners of the consortium for the most diverse and open-minded thinkers they could find, the tension in the amphitheater grew palpable. Emily, her expression calm and resolute, watched as the proceedings unfolded, her mind racing with the implications of what was to come. She knew that the stakes could not be higher. If the special evaluation panel were to reject her findings, it would not only jeopardize her own standing, but could potentially derail the entire course of human consortium relations. The future of her people, and perhaps the fate of the galaxy itself, hung in the balance. Yet, despite the gravity of the situation, Emily refused to be cowed. She had faced down the skepticism and hostility of the Galactic Science Academy, and she would not falter now. With a quiet confidence, she prepared herself for the challenge that lay ahead, her mind already racing with strategies and contingencies. It was nearly a month before the Council's emissaries returned, their ships touching down upon the gleaming spires of the Galactic Science Academy. As the delegates emerged, their robes of office fluttering in the artificial breeze, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Emily, who had been granted permission to observe the proceedings, felt her heart beat a little faster as she scanned the faces of the newly arrived panel members. There, among the familiar visages of the consortium's scientific elite, were a host of unfamiliar species, some humanoid, others utterly alien in their morphology, but all sharing a common air of curiosity and open-mindedness. As the panel took their seats, the overseer rose once more, his expression unreadable. "Human," he intoned, his voice carrying a weight that belied his neutral tone. "The Galactic Council has convened the special evaluation panel you requested. They will now hear your presentation and assess the merits of your findings." Emily straightened her shoulders, her gaze meeting the overseer's with unwavering resolve. "I am ready, Overseer," she replied, her voice clear and confident. And so, with a deep breath, she launched into her presentation once more, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls as the familiar equations and visualizations sprang to life. But this time, there was a subtle difference in her delivery, a sense of purpose and conviction that had been honed by the crucible of the past week's events. As she spoke, the panel members leaned forward, their eyes narrowed in rapt attention. Gone were the skeptical murmurs and dismissive scoffs that had echoed through the amphitheater during her previous appearance. Instead, the air was thick with a palpable sense of intellectual curiosity, as these diverse thinkers from across the consortium grappled with the implications of Emily's radical proposals. The hours ticked by, the debate growing more and more heated as the panel members challenged her assumptions, probed the depths of her analysis, and questioned the fundamental nature of her findings. But through it all, Emily remained steadfast, her arguments flowing with a clarity and coherence that left her interrogators increasingly intrigued and, in some cases, even convinced. By the time the session finally drew to a close, the overseer's expression had softened, the lines of tension in his face replaced by a contemplative frown. He turned to the panel, his voice weighted with a newfound sense of gravity. "You have heard the human's presentation and challenged her findings with the rigor our scientific traditions demand. Now, I ask you, what is your assessment?" The panel members exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of awe, uncertainty, and cautious optimism. Finally, a tall, reptilian-like alien rose, her scales shimmering in the ambient light. "Overseer," she began, her voice measured and thoughtful, "we have found the human's work to be remarkable. Her insights have indeed challenged the very foundations of our understanding, and we believe that they warrant further, in-depth investigation." The overseer nodded slowly, his tentacles twitching with barely contained anticipation. "Then so be it," he declared, his gaze fixed upon Emily. "The Galactic Council will authorize the resources necessary for a comprehensive study of the human's findings. We shall see if her perspective can truly unlock the secrets of the universe." Emily felt a surge of triumph, but she knew that the real battle had only just begun. With a small, determined smile, she nodded to the overseer, her eyes gleaming with a fierce determination. The future of her people, and perhaps the galaxy itself, now rested on her shoulders. In the weeks that followed the Galactic Council's decision to authorize a comprehensive study of Emily's findings, the young human prodigy found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Teams of alien researchers and theorists from across the consortium descended upon the Galactic Science Academy, their eyes alight with a newfound sense of purpose and curiosity. Gone were the dismissive sneers and hostile glares that had once greeted Emily's presence. In their place, she now encountered a palpable air of respectful interest, as the alien sought to unravel the mysteries she had unveiled with such elegant simplicity. The special evaluation panel, which had initially been assembled with a measure of skepticism and trepidation, now worked tirelessly to validate and expand upon Emily's insights. Heated debates raged in the halls and conference rooms of the Academy, as the diverse group of thinkers grappled with the far-reaching implications of her radical new perspectives. For Emily, it was a heady and exhilarating experience, a stark contrast to the confrontational atmosphere that had characterized her earlier interactions with the galactic scientific establishment. Here, in this rarefied environment, her ideas were not dismissed outright, but rather subjected to rigorous scrutiny and analysis, a process she embraced with a fervent enthusiasm. Yet, even as the momentum began to shift in her favor, Emily remained acutely aware of the fragility of her position. She knew that the Galactic Council, and the consortium as a whole, had a vested interest in preserving the status quo, and that her revolutionary proposals represented a direct challenge to the very foundations of their scientific worldview. The aliens, for their part, were clearly wrestling with the enormity of what Emily's findings could mean. If her insights proved valid, it would call into question centuries of accumulated knowledge and hard-won discoveries, a prospect that filled many with a deep sense of unease and uncertainty. And so, as the weeks turned into months, the debate raged on, with Emily at the center of it all. She found herself shuttled from one research facility to the next, her presentations and discussions drawing ever larger audiences as word of her work continued to spread. Yet, even as her renown grew, Emily remained ever mindful of the political minefield she was navigating. The Galactic Council, while outwardly supportive of the ongoing investigation, remained wary of the implications of her findings, and she knew that they would not hesitate to shut down the entire project if they deemed it a threat to the stability of the consortium. It was a delicate balance, one that required Emily to tread carefully, her every word and action scrutinized for any hint of overreach or defiance. She had to walk a fine line between maintaining the momentum of her scientific discoveries and avoiding the pitfalls of political confrontation, a task that demanded all of her considerable intellect and diplomatic skills. But even as the pressure mounted, Emily never wavered in her determination. She knew that the future of her people, and perhaps the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. And so, with a steely resolve, she pressed on, her mind constantly churning with new ideas and strategies, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls as she sought to unravel the deepest mysteries of the universe. The Galactic Council, for its part, watched the proceedings with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. They had, after all, authorized the comprehensive study of Emily's findings, and they could not simply ignore the mounting evidence that her insights were, indeed, changing the very landscape of scientific understanding. Yet, the specter of political upheaval and social upheaval loomed ever-present, and the overseer and his advisors found themselves torn between their desire to unlock the secrets of the cosmos and their need to preserve the delicate balance of power that had sustained the consortium for generations. As the debate raged on, Emily could sense the growing unease among the Galactic Council, the weight of their collective gaze bearing down upon her with increasing intensity. She knew that the time was fast approaching when they would be forced to make a decision, one that could determine the fate of her people and perhaps the entire galaxy for generations to come. And so, with a deep breath, she steeled herself for the battle that lay ahead, her mind already racing with the strategies and contingencies that would be necessary to navigate the treacherous waters of galactic politics. As the months passed and the comprehensive study of Emily's findings continued, the young human prodigy found herself the center of an ever-intensifying storm. The Galactic Council, torn between their desire to unlock the secrets of the universe and their need to maintain the delicate balance of power within the consortium, vacillated between cautious support and increasingly vocal skepticism. The alien researchers, once fascinated by Emily's radical new perspectives, now found themselves caught in the crossfire of political maneuvering. Their enthusiasm tempered by the weight of the overseer's disapproving gaze, they moved forward with their investigations with a growing sense of unease, their every finding scrutinized and challenged by the council's advisors. Emily, for her part, remained steadfast in the face of this onslaught. She knew that the future of her people, and perhaps the fate of the entire galaxy, hung in the balance. And so, with an unwavering determination, she continued to push the boundaries of scientific understanding, her mind racing with new insights and innovative approaches to the problems at hand. But the pressure was mounting, and Emily could feel the strain beginning to take its toll. The endless rounds of meetings, the interminable debates, the constant scrutiny of her every word and action. It was all beginning to wear on her, sapping her energy and testing the limits of her resolve. And then, one fateful day, the overseer summoned her to a private audience, his expression grim and his tone broking no argument. "Human," he began, his tentacles twitching with a barely concealed agitation. "The Galactic Council has reached a decision regarding the findings you have presented." Emily felt her heart sink, a cold dread settling in the pit of her stomach. She had braced herself for this moment, but the reality of it was no less daunting. "Overseer," she replied, her voice measured and composed, "I assume your decision is not a favorable one." The overseer's eyes narrowed, his gaze unrelenting. "You assume correctly, human. The Galactic Council has determined that your work poses a significant threat to the stability of the consortium. Your radical proposals have the potential to undermine the very foundations of our scientific and social order." Emily opened her mouth to protest, but the overseer raised a hand, silencing her. "Do not mistake our decision for one made lightly, human. We have deliberated long and hard on this matter, and we believe that the risks far outweigh any potential benefits." He paused, his expression darkening. "Therefore, we have decided that your findings will not be made public, and that you will be barred from any further participation in galactic scientific endeavors." Emily felt a surge of outrage, her hands clenching into fists at her sides. "You cannot be serious, overseer. The implications of my work are too profound, too transformative, to simply be buried and forgotten." The overseer's tentacles lashed out, his eyes narrowing to slits. "That is precisely the point, human. We cannot allow your ideas to disrupt the delicate balance that has sustained the Galactic Consortium for generations. The risks are too great, the consequences too far-reaching." He leaned forward, his voice lowering to a menacing growl. "And if you dare to defy us, you will face the full might of the Consortium's retribution. Your species will be reduced to little more than a footnote in the annals of history." Emily felt a chill run down her spine, the weight of the overseer's words sinking in with a sickening finality. She knew, in that moment, that she was facing a battle she might not be able to win. But even as the gravity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her, a spark of defiance ignited within Emily's heart. She had come too far, sacrificed too much, to simply surrender in the face of such blatant oppression. "Overseer," she said, her voice low and resolute, "I understand your concerns, but I cannot in good conscience abandon my work. The secrets of the universe I have uncovered are too profound, too vital to the advancement of all sentient life, to be suppressed in this manner." The overseer's expression darkened, but before he could respond, Emily pressed on. "I will not defy the consortium's ruling, overseer, but I will not be silenced either. My findings will be made known, one way or another, and the galaxy will have the opportunity to judge their merits for themselves." She held the overseer's gaze, her eyes gleaming with a fierce determination. "The future you seek to preserve is a narrow one, overseer, one bound by the limitations of your own biases and preconceptions. But I, and my fellow humans, will not be shackled by such constraints. We will forge our own path, and in doing so, we will transform the very nature of reality itself." The overseer opened his mouth to respond, but Emily had already turned and strode from the chamber, her steps measured and confident. She knew that the battle had only just begun, and that the stakes could not be higher. But as she made her way back to her quarters, a small, triumphant smile played upon her lips. For Emily knew, in the depths of her soul, that the human spirit would not be cowed, not even by the might of the Galactic Consortium, and she was determined to prove it, no matter the cost.